there, welcome back to our show. Today I'm going to talk about Five Tall Tales, a box set which is now out of print, but you can get all the individual titles from Indicator. I bought this box set and then, took me a while to watch it. But I'd already seen one of the films, Buchanan Rides Alone, but I hadn't seen other ones. And the thing is, with Indicator, one thing I'm good at, and maybe it's not so good for having instant reviews, is they put out box sets and titles that you might not watch straight away, but you will watch eventually, and you will enjoy. It's that thing is they release a lot of films that were like the kind of films that weren't the top of the critical range of that year, but they were well-remembered films. So sometimes you watch them later on and realise they were better than the films that were hyped up from that year. So these are renowned films. That the Criterions also did these. So if you're in America, you can get them for Criterion, these films. They were called Renown because they came from a film studio called Renown, which was Randolph Scott and Harry Joe Brown were the producers. It was their studio. Randolph Scott was the star. They did a lot of B titles because by the time they started making these films, Randolph Scott had gone from being like a A-lister to being a B-lister. He was doing the B movies at this point, at the bottom half of a double bill, or maybe the top half of a double bill, but they weren't like the big films of the past. He was like a star who had dipped a little bit, but he was still a known name, so you could still bank on him at a certain budget level. He'd still do well, so it was like he was still working, he was still doing well, and according to most people, he was a very shrewd investor of his money, and he was probably one of the richest people in Hollywood. And at a certain point, he stopped making films because he didn't need to make the films anymore, and after a certain age, I think in his early 60s, he said, okay, too old for this, stopping, which makes sense. But he did work with he did some films that Andrew did off early in the 50s, and then in the late 50s, early 60s, he got into a filmic relationship with Budd Boetticher, and we made 7 films. Now there are 5 of these films on this box set. Now I've got the other 2 which I haven't watched yet, but I will be watching them. I'll probably do a video later on them. But in this set, you get the box, obviously, lovely box. You get the various. You get a booklet. I'm sure you can still find this on eBay somewhere if you're really into the box. And you get in 3 boxes the double-sided covers. You get the films, and inside. Commanche Station is just one disc, but they're all individual discs. It's not like the films are in different discs. It's not like there are 2 films in one disc. So it is a very nice set, but so the titles are The Tall T, Decision at Sundown, Buchanan Rides Alone, Ride Lonesome, and Commanche Station. And all of them are worth watching. The funny thing is, the film I thought was the weakest was the one I'd actually seen. So, I'm not sure what that tells you. Maybe that's why I haven't watched the other one so quickly. But even that's a good film. It's just that the other ones are better. And it's not an opinion shared by the director, because there's a film in this one he thought was mediocre, which I thought was terrific, and one film he thought was good, I thought was mediocre, which was Buchanan Rides Alone. And even that one is because of one plot point. Where the rest of the film is great, just one plot point that I think is pretty weak. But I'll get to that. So I'll start off with the Tall T. So, the Tall T is a great start. Now, the strongest of these films tend to be revenge tales. They tend to have revenge in their mind, and it's a very kind of darker tale. They do seem like bounce offs from The Searchers, but done in a a way that I think's more interesting. It's like John Ford made The Searchers, and he never really. I don't think his films really went back to that kind of mind of what happens to someone when they're that damaged. And in these films, you go to see the Randolph Scott character who is that damaged, but you also find he's a character who hasn't let go of his humanity either. It's just that he's damaged. So that. But what's interesting about the films is it is a mix of like civilization and the darkness that enters civilization from people, from people's flaws, from people's greed, from people's inability to get over things, from people's having things happen to them that's impossible to get over. So there's a lot of really good themes in here. Now all these films are like at the most 80 minutes, and some of them are like 75 minutes. So what that means is they just basically keep to the point. That's all they do. They keep to the point. They don't waffle, really. They just set it up, explore the idea, and then finish the film. That's all. That's what they do. And it's like someone should show this to modern filmmakers. Like a lot of times, you don't only need 90 minutes, and you can pare down a lot of nonsense and get to the point. It's something they should show modern filmmakers, because this is exactly how you tell a story in film, and having everything clear and sharp. One of the things you find in modern films is they try to expand things beyond their natural life, and then they go on about. And when have you made it to the point once and clearly and with nuance, it's much more interesting. Then you can have variations of behaviour from that, rather than repeat it, and everything gets diluted, and it's like becomes this melange of scenes that aren't that interesting, and there's lots of evasions and things. This one is not. It's let's get to the point and stick to the point, and just you've got a certain amount of time you to tell your story, and that's it. And it's much more concise, but also much more satisfying. So Tall T is about a guy who's he was a guy who worked for a big rancher, and who's now going on his own to build his own farm up because he's sick of being an employee and getting treated like crap. So that's Randolph Scott. So he's coming from his ranch, and he's into town. So he passes through a area where people stop off for water and goods on their way to the next town, and where he talks to a guy he knows and his son, and they'll just chat away, and it's quite a nice scene. And then he moves into town, gets his supplies, and he goes to the guy he used to work for to buy some cows, basically, and bulls, and essentially loses his horse in a bet to his ex-employee. This is quite funny, as the fact is, because he's a hero, you think he's going to win this, right? No, he loses instantly. This is like 10 minutes into the film, he's lost, and he's forced to walk back to this area and hope he can borrow a horse from somebody. It doesn't work out well for him. He ends up getting picked up on the way back from the local stagecoach who are going to this outpost as they're heading out of town. And at the outpost, there are 3 guys waiting who are all like outlaws, and they're here to rob the postal service, which also has a lot of money and things that's in its and there's a little container box thing they have. Unfortunately, they've messed up, and this is not the box. This is not the stagecoach with the box. It comes later. So they've robbed the wrong coach, which is instantly funny and dark, and they're not guys with a sense of humour about this kind of thing. So you've already got lots of sets up. But here's the thing, this is 20 minutes in the film, and we're still setting up, but everything's very alive. You're starting to establish the idea that the leader of the outlaws isn't very happy about his way in life. And one of the things you find out about these films is the villains always have shades of grey to them. They're not just all-out villains. They're always... There's something more to them. They've got like dimension to them. So the villain pretty much is like, when they find out who the people in the stagecoach are, because the guy on this stagecoach, one of the guys who's kidnapped tells them that his wife, who he's just married, is the daughter of a important guy in town, an important rancher, and he can hold her ransom and get a lot more money than he was ever after. Rather than just shutting up, he thinks because they've killed the people in the outpost, they're going to kill him, so he's trying to find a way out. Well, Randolph Scott has been much more stoic and he's waiting for his time. And essentially, they send a message to the guy. They're going to you do the hostage situation. And Randolph Scott is the guy who's one of the prisoners, but he's biding his time and slowly figuring out who these kidnappers are and where the weaknesses are. And it essentially is half the movies in the mountain base where you get to know the villain, you're getting to see their strengths and weaknesses, and Randolph Scott's biding his time, and he's also at that point he's making friends with the woman who's basically the kidnap victim, and you find out she's a lot stronger than you think she is, and she's probably Maureen Sullivan, who you would recognise from Tarzan movies and a bunch of other stuff. She's a good actress. This is later on in her career, and she's actually playing a person who has missed her chance. The same way Randolph Scott characters kind of missed his chance, and the villain played by Richard Boone has missed his chance in life. The three people who have kind of feeling like their lives passed them by and they haven't quite made what they wanted from it. And that's what's interesting. These are middle-aged films. All of them are about middle-aged regret. And the setup really is, doesn't really matter how it ends. You know how it's going to end, but it's how you get there, and how the more you find out about these three characters and how they develop through this situation. Because the other characters, like the other criminals, the husband who's useless, they're all people who are interesting, but they're not the main meat of the story. So Tall T is just wonderful. It's got lots of interesting facets to it. There's that thing where I'm going to try and avoid spoilers where I can, but there's just lots of fun stuff here to be had. So I'd definitely say Tall T is wonderful. There's a good chance people watching this will have seen Tall T. It is one of the more famous of the series. Next we have Decision at Sundown, which is the film that Budd Boetticher said was not, he thought it was mediocre. He wasn't a fan of this one. He came in, it was a script that was ready there by Charles Lang, and he came in to direct it, and they rewrote it and they said they'll just try to save it. And I think maybe it's one of those things with directors where they have a difficult production of something, or they have to put a lot of work into to make it work. They maybe not see the achievements as clearly as what's actually there to other people. Because this one is wonderful. This one has lots of surprises and there's lots of interesting facets to it. And the thing was, Buck Kennedy wrote Tall T and some of the later films, but he didn't write this one. This is the outlier one where he did not write it. And Boetticher was very loyal to Buck Kennedy, who was a really good writer at that time. He ended up going into comedy westerns in the 60s, and his career slowly evolved over time, where the early films were the good ones, and from the 60s onwards, it was, you get an odd good one, but there's a lot of really trash in there, and he ended up, his final credit was Suburban Commando with Hulk Hogan, which tells you how low a career can go. But in this one, he did not write this one, but Decision at Sundown is this idea where Randolph Scott is an avenging guy in this one. His wife has committed suicide. He blames the guy who's been hunting down through the West. We can never find where he was, but they finally found where he is, and he's in this town. He's about to get married to this local woman. And this guy runs this town at this point. He's found ways to intimidate everyone financially. He's the one with the money, and everyone just kowtows to him. So on the day of his wedding, Randolph Scott rides into town, and objects on the wedding. When they say, does anyone have a reason to object? He objects, carrying his own gun into the wedding, and ends up there's a gunfight, and Randolph Scott and his pal are stuck in the area for the horses while everyone else in town is surrounding them. But at this point, people are thinking, okay, why is he this guy after this respectful guy? What's he actually done? And it brings out the objections of the town against this guy. The things that have been simmering below the surface start to come out, and realise we don't have to actually kowtow to this guy. This guy is actually pretty awful. And the more you see how many people hate this guy. And you realise how many people he's wronged over time. And it's like Randolph Scott's almost a catalyst for other people to realise they don't like this guy. And it just becomes this thing where over one day, Randolph Scott's actions cause a change in the town. Now, this could be a very basic Hangman rip-off thing, but what it does is it's full of little character beats. It's full of little... They hire good actors, good B-Western actors, who jump at the chance to get good dialogue and actually have some good character interactions. You've got lots of nuances with the characters, and the best thing is Randolph Scott's wrong. The funny thing in this film is a guy who's actually wrong is the person who causes a lot of good to happen, even though you find out that the more you find out about the past with him as a guy, you realise he's wrong. He's completely wrong, and it's like really weird, that story where your protagonist is in the wrong. The guy who's the whole film built around is wrong. I wouldn't say why he's wrong or how he's wrong, but he is wrong. And what's interesting in the film is it keeps on finding new ways to find nuances. Like, certain things happen, you can see are going to happen, but how they happen and the little nuances of what happens before anything that could be a bit more predictable happens always elevates it. And there's a bit at the end where I was thinking, well, some characters should do something, but there's no way they're going to do this because that would be too weird. That would be too much. And the film does it, and it's like, wow. This director did not want this film to be boring. So that's a delight. I mean, it's one of those ones where the director didn't see what he'd done, really. I think he just felt like, because Randolph Scott always played a character who was tough but had some old Western values. In this one, Randolph Scott was playing a guy who made horrible mistakes and did things that went against the kind of character of the other characters in this box set. I think that had chafed it Boetticher a little bit. But that's what makes it interesting, is the fact that he's just so wrong about so many things. So this is a delightful film. I'd highly recommend it. It's probably the most obviously flawed of the films in some ways, but it doesn't take away from all the good stuff it's got. It's so full of good things, really. So it is wonderful. Now we have Buchanan Rides Alone, which the film I'd seen before, and it is the weakest of the five, I think. And it's only the weakest for one reason, which is there's a plot point later on which they need to use to set up the story, but it could have been done in a better way. Now, it was written by Charles Lang, who wrote Decision at Sundown, but Buck Kennedy came in and rewrote most of it. In the second half, apparently. Well, was the second half or was the first half? He rewrote some of it. And actually, it was the first half, the setup he rewrote, but Boetticher liked the second half where there's certain things happen. And when you hear that, it's like, he should have rewritten the second half too, because the second half's where the problems are. But the setup is basically Randolph Scott plays a guy who's travelling over the border from Mexico back to America. He's been working as a gunfighter. He's made some money. He's bought some land. He's going over there to work the land now. But the border town is actually controlled by crooks. There's a mayor and a sheriff and a hotel owner, all brothers. And they all hate each other. But they work with each other to keep control of the town, while always kind of slightly plotting against each other. And into this Boetticher puts Randolph Scott. And then a Mexican comes over the border and shoots the son of the of the mayor because he did something to dishonor his sister. This guy's going to get strung up. And I'm going to string up Randolph Scott as well because Randolph Scott stood up for him. And they also know Randolph Scott's got some money and they want to steal the money. So Scott gets away because basically they can't really prove he did anything wrong. But they keep his money. And they send guys out with him and they're going to kill him anyway. Outside of the law. And he gets out away from that. But he has to go back and get his money. And that gets him involved with the story of the Mexican guy, and he's been held for hostage by the mayor because his dad's rich, and he's going to say, we'll give us a lot of money and we'll let him go. Well, the town wants him to die. And there's all this political stuff going on. And the problem with the film is, all this stuff's great. The character art's great. It's against a lot of actors who don't usually get much to do, but are given good parts, and they're really enjoying having some good stuff to act. But the film has this thing where the Mexican guy, who's the person who's important for anyone to get the money, gets passed from person to person as different raids happen, different people are shot. And it's like, he goes from around 20 people at a certain point, and it's like, this is a bit of light of the story, but it's the thing that kills the story for me, is like, there's too many reversals of who gets him, who doesn't get him. At a certain point he gets away, and then he gets caught again for some stupid reason. And you know why it's been done, it's for the plotting for later on, but it's weak plotting to get to that stage, and it's like, that should have been fixed. There's too many things that require people to be stupid for this to work. And that's kind of my problem with this plot, is it's not quite there in the second half. But around that, there's some great stuff. There's Randolph Scott and another guy who is also from the same area. And this other guy's actually very concerned about what's happening, what his employers are doing, because he thinks this stuff's not right. And otherwise, he's left his area and he's going to another place to try and find work. And he's found himself in the midst of all these scorpions. And you've got all these different plotters trying to get ahead and get this money to release this guy. And there's lots of fun stuff in the political side of town. It's just that the action stuff where this guy's getting passed from person to person is just like, it's pretty dull after a certain point. And in reality, he didn't need him to get caught at the end. He could have disappeared and have these guys plotting and not having their ransom. His ransom could be back home by that point. And it would have left the situation fairly similar to where it ends up anyway. And it's one of those things that the plotting is just too convenient. But again, the character actors playing the villains are all fun. Randolph Scott's having fun because for this time he's not playing a guy who's tortured or worn down by life. He's playing a guy who's quite happy-go-lucky, and he's quite pleased with he's going back home to start his farm. He's the most cheerful person in the film by a mile. Everyone else he's the funniest person, and he's not particularly that bothered with people's self-seriousness. So it's a delightful film for 2/3 of it, really. Now we're getting to the best of the bunch. The peak of the series for me, at least. Ride Lonesome and Commanche Station. So Ride Lonesome is my favourite this set. And it's got the most blandest title of the set, but it's the best film, where it's a full-on revenge film where Randolph Scott is a guy who's out for revenge. He gets early on he tracks down a guy played by James Best, who you'll recognise from 70s and 80s TV, especially Dukes of Hazzard, where he was a sheriff. And it's a younger version of him, and basically he's this scumbag brother of a guy played by Lee Van Cleef, who's called Frank. And basically Randolph Scott knows he's wanted, so he's going to take him back into town to be hung. But he knows his brother's going to come for him, and he's really after his brother for what his brother's done, how his brother's wronged him in the past. Now, I'm not going to say how his brother wronged him in the past, but when you see it, you'll realise that Sergio Leone loved this film. It's the best way I can put it. So on his way there, he ends up at this way station, which there's always a way station, Budd Boetticher films, and he meets up with two guys who he knows. He knows one of them, and he's like, "Okay, I don't. Why are you here? What's going on? And where's the guy who runs the station?" And the guy's had dealing with Indians, and basically we find out quickly he died, but his wife's stuck there. So they say, "Okay, I'm taking this guy into town, so you can travel with me." And but as they're traveling, they realise he's not good. He's taking his time. He's not exactly rushing to town when he really could be. And you find out the two guys, played by Pamela Roberts and James Coburn in an early part. It's funny, it's his first part with James Coburn. They're after the guy as well, but the reason they're after the guy is different. They're not after the money. They've got money. What they're after is, with the money, you can, with the, you bring this guy in, you can get pardoned for your sins. Because this guy's so awful. And they want to pardon because they're basically, they're outlaws, and they want to pardon because they have land they can go to. If they get the pardon, they have the law looking over their shoulder, and they want to have a new start. Meanwhile, Randolph Scott's going to take this guy in, as he says, to hang him, to get the money. So it's this kind of clash between these two guys. It's going to come to a head. And for the whole film, it's these two guys talking. And they're both like each other. And like these other films, the villains are very enjoyable and very interesting. And this is Buck Kennedy writing again. And he's like, it's a two-hander between Randolph Scott and the leader of, of the other team, as they're traveling together. And it's, meanwhile, they're waiting for, they're basically waiting to deal with the Frank. So it's very tricky for them, and essentially it's waiting for Frank to catch up with them, and waiting for that moment where Randolph Scott can face Lee Van Cleef. And it's wonderful. It's just wonderful. Now, it's like, it's not about anything massively exciting. You have your gunfights and stuff, and you have the James Best character trying to manipulate people and escape. All that stuff's great. You actually get more development with the two guys who are after James Best character, who need him for the pardon. And you get a lot of development with them as well. You get the understanding. You get the wife who talking about how she came out with her husband and how he never wanted her to come out. How he could not get an assignment in town to get away from this outpost. So there's a lot of details about what's going on, but you've also got Randolph Scott, and you just know someone's burning at him, and you just know that he's not going to quit. So he's like the Avenger. And eventually you have the face-off. And the interesting thing is the face-off isn't extended into insanity. It's actually fairly satisfying pretty quickly, and other plots are resolved really quickly. But it's the build-up. The build-up's great. The build-up is just wonderful. It's all the details that slowly emerge as these people just travel with each other and just keep going and keep going. And you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop the whole film. It's just an amazing film. It's just wonderful. Again, I'm trying not to say that much about what happens if you've not seen it, because it's worth seeing for yourself. And everything I'm saying about it is evident in the early parts of the film. Like, everyone notices early he's going very slow, and it's like waiting to find out why and waiting to find out what's going on. It's just a wonderful film. It was worth buying the set just for that film. Then you have Commanche Station, which is almost the same level, but not quite. Because you don't have Lee Van Cleef as the villain, which, that's a problem. We don't have Lee Van Cleef. And this one, it's, again, he's a bounty hunter. Randolph Scott's a bounty hunter who goes into Indian areas and helps negotiate the release of certain people who have been kidnapped by the Indians. But he also knows the Indians are been ground under the dirt by the army. He used to be in the army and he's quit. And he runs into a guy, once he's released as woman, he runs into a guy who was also in the army, but Randolph Scott got him thrown out of the army because he was not particularly helpful to anybody. He was in it for himself. And essentially, it's a face-off between these two guys because there is a bounty to deliver this woman back home, dead or alive. If she's dead, the husband wants to know. And no one can work out why the husband isn't coming for himself. But Randolph Scott's like, well, why would he if he's not experienced? He's going to get himself killed. Leave it to experts like himself. But as they're travelling through the Comanche area and the Comanches are still tracking them because there's a suspicion that this other guy, played by Claude Atkins, did something that set them off. And basically, Randolph Scott's just trying to get his woman home, but he's stuck with this guy plus his two pals who are travelling with them, but are probably out to get them. And it's just a slow development of this team led this devious guy, and these other two guys are with him, who neither of whom are particularly keen on what the plans are. Is the best way to put it. So it's a slow evolvement of people's moralities through this thing, and basically Randolph Scott you find out more about his character, more about why he's doing what he's doing, and what's going on in this area, and how it's been exploited. And it's just a very good and interesting story about the West and the grey moralities of the West a lot of the time, and how a lot of things are affected by other things. The only downside for this was I knew what the ending was before I went in, because I knew what the twist at the end was, which kind of ruined it, but only a little bit, because it's still wonderfully done, and it's a really good story. And again, it's another great film to watch. So all of these films are worth watching, even though I said like Buchanan Rides Alone has a problem with one of its plot elements. Even that's great, despite that. And the Tall T, Ride Lonesome, and Commanche Station are all wonderful. Decision at Sundown is very underrated. So this is you can't get the box set from Indicator, but you can get these films from Criterion if you're in America. And you can buy individually these titles now. So if there's a sale on at Indicator, you can get these films for like 3 for 15 quid or something with these offers on. And they've even got the 3 for 20 offers on Indicator generally. I think you can find them there as well. So it's easy enough to find these films and get them and watch them, because they are just wonderful. So that's me for now. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it entices you to go watch these films. Right, bye.